Hello, almost home. And because we have a lot of house cleaning and stuff and little raffle and evaluations and so on, we're going to end promptly at 11. So we both just I want to give Debbie has a 15-minute thing, and she really needs 15 minutes for it, which I completely get. So we're just going to talk for a second. The socio-cultural domain. And I think it's for the reasons we talked about at the beginning. Both Debbie and I talked about how we use social psych to teach methods for a lot of reasons. One, because of what's happening today. You tack social psych or socio-cultural onto the end, and then you run out of time, sort of like what we're doing. I hate that because I love social psych and it's so interesting. So I do recommend, we both recommend, trying to use social psych examples when you're teaching methodology, because you can do all the methodology using social psych and also at least float a lot of the social psych concepts, so even if you run out of time later on, you will have done it some justice. And you can do ethics and research, my gosh, so many examples of that in social psychology and so on. I was going to do this thing. Some of you may have seen it before as an activity, just to model it, but we can explain it because it would take too long. So I'm just going to walk you through it. I also have a version, and I can send it to you if you're interested, of a little thing on the Milgram study. Everyone knows the obedience study. And you don't necessarily need to do this. You might, if you were teaching an advanced placement class, that they'd have to know about variations on the Milgram study. But it's really good to deepen their understanding of it anyway, to ask them, so what if, and you've probably done this when you've discussed it. Have you, when you discussed the Milgram study, say, what if it was a woman authority figure? What if a female authority figure? Or what if it was a female who is being shocked, allegedly being shocked and screaming in the other room? How would these variables play out? I think it can be good to systematically do that, and I have a little write-up of a bunch of just asking the kids in almost survey form, would this increase levels of obedience, decrease, or have no effect? And just that little activity after you've dealt with it is a good also kind of formative assessment. It tells you they really get the Milgram study, because they can't really answer those questions unless they get the basics of the original version. And then you could follow up with, there are charts in almost every textbook about some of the variations and how, if you didn't, do you remember where it took place, for instance? The Milgram obedience study? 1963. It was at Yale. And Milgram was, dare I say it, shocked by his findings. He did not expect, says, high levels of obedience. You probably know that. That was a little pun I make sometimes in class. Anyway, so one of the things, like, well, maybe Yale like stacked the deck. I mean, it's Yale. You think, come on, they must know what they're doing. Who am I? They're Yale. So he replicated it in a storefront, like next to a tattoo parlor or something in Bridgeport, Connecticut, I think, in kind of a tough neighborhood. And have you ever seen it? I've seen like pictures of the building they used, and it really was like Vinny's tattoo parlor and then a pizza joint in this place. And obedience did decrease, I think, to 48%, and the original study was 65, 66%. And there were many other variations like that. So you can ask them about that without telling them about them. Say, what would it do if we had it somewhere else, if we changed gender and so on. And they can't, it tells you that they understand it. And it's also interesting, and it's a kind of critical thinking activity. Most everyone who teaches psych does the Milgram study and maybe shows the video, and you don't have enough time probably to show a 48-minute video. I know I don't, and I don't want to do that anyway. But a little activity like that can really help. The other social psych idea I wanted to share is something, actually originally I saw a write-up of it from Randy Smith, who spoke to us in the keynote. Long time ago, because I met him a long time ago, when he was at Ouachita Baptist College. And I think he doesn't claim originality on it, but my only source is that I saw a version of it that he did. And now I gave you my version. How many of you have seen this before? You have. How do you use it?
Well,
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that this is what I wrote as my most memorable moment
Good.
in my Psych 101 class. We did something very similar, but I was, well, I don't know if you were ready, but they did rape actually as opposed to being killed.
Yes.
And that's not in here, is it?
No.
Which,
but
so I also debated about whether to do that with my students because it's an interesting, slightly controversial.
without reading it, I'll just explain, and there's one little caveat too. I was going to do it with you. It's a story involving a ferry boat. A person is sneaking out at night. Their spouse works nights and sneaks out at night, takes a ferry to a little island, and does something, and then there's a couple of variations, that's why I say that. And then they get back home because they don't want their spouse to know that they're doing this thing, and they always get back home. But then one night, the ferry, they don't have the money for the ferry. They can't get home. I'm really simplifying this. And they take a dangerous road to an alternative ferry, but everybody knows, don't take that road. Like you've heard Mr. Gruber has said this 19 times. Do not walk outside of this campus or you will be dead. I've gone to CVS with like 3 people and they said, I was thinking of walking, but Craig said, do not do that, do not walk anywhere. So it was like that kind of road. Everyone's like, hey, if you walk to CVS, you ain't coming back, basically. So the word was out, don't take this road. But they're desperate. They take the road anyway. And bank robber, not bank robber, the bank, a highwayman jumps out and it costs you, there's a struggle, you die. And this is where my version is maybe different from Randy's or others, because you could do very different versions of this. You give all the characters, there were several characters in the story, I'm sorry I'm doing so fast, and you can assign blame points. Who's most responsible for this person's death? And you can either assign blame points or do a rating, just a ranking, who's most responsible, who's least responsible, and so on. But the trick is, of course, and I do about 3 demos like this where you give them something and ask their opinion, but there's actually more than one version out there. I like that. I just like that revelation part. Because you'll then ask people, say, Simone, what did you think? You said, well, I think he was crazy to take that road. I don't know why he did that. And then someone else will be like, what are you talking about him? I thought it was a woman. Because there's actually 4 versions. In one version, a man is sneaking out at night while his wife works to have an affair. He's sleeping with other women. He sneaks back before she knows it. In another condition, it's a female who is sneaking out at night, sleeping around on her husband, and then she tries to get back home. And then this would be terrible in an actual experiment to have these intervening variables, sort of, but for a demo, I think it's fine. In another version, a man is sneaking out at night to volunteer at a local hospital. The kids don't really question that, but then they think like, it's really stupid, like I better, because my wife doesn't like me volunteering at local hospitals. And in another one, the other one they find more plausible, which also gets at gender schemas, is a female. Her old-fashioned husband, old-fashioned, like really old-fashioned, says, I don't want you working at all. And she's like, well, he works nights. I'm volunteering at this hospital. I don't care what he thinks. I'll just get home before he gets home. And in each of these cases, there are other characters in the story. Will people attribute blame differently? And you can easily float dispositional and situational attributions, the fundamental attribution error, maybe self-serving bias too, part of it, so you can really get at all that. It's not only social psychology in the socio-cultural domain. Attribution theory is a part of personality theory. It's a part of explanations part of the cognitive explanations for different disorders. Certainly fits into treatment too, so it's an important concept. And it also can spiral back to, if you've done the Genovese case or other bystander effect stuff, the idea of blaming the victim, the just world phenomenon, which also can tie in this case to the pluralistic ignorance that's in the diffusion of responsibility idea, the bystander effect. There was a case some of you may not know of in Massachusetts. So our kids don't know this anymore. The Big Dan's case. Do you know Big Dan's? You do. Jay's from New Hampshire, so he would know. But it was also made into a movie, The Accused, Jodie Foster. You know that? she focused more, fine, for dramatic effect too, on the woman herself, which also the court case did, because the woman ended up being put on trial. But a woman was gang raped on a pool table in a bar that I've seen. It's not a bar anymore.
With bystanders cheering the rape.
Yeah, and of course, this just like the Genovese case, there's still conflicting facts about the case, and some of them have become part of what everyone says, but people have questioned that. Big Dan's too. There were questions about, so how many actually, but more than one person raped her, and people either cheered or at least did nothing. One person left the bar, this is before cell phones, left the bar after it was over and went down the street to a payphone and called someone after it was over. And it's really hard to imagine that you could be in a bar and see someone being raped on a pool table and explain it away to yourself, the pluralistic ignorance idea. Well, no one's doing anything, it must be okay. And when we talk to kids, we're like, how could you tell yourself that? But then you get a cognitive dissonance too. The longer you don't do anything, the more likely you are not to do anything, because you think, I haven't done anything, so I guess I shouldn't do anything. And if I do something, then I have to acknowledge that I should have done something. So it is a nasty trap. But
It was a fairly seedy bar and a fairly seedy part of a working class town. It was not.
And that became part of the court case, as women, sadly, in this room would know even better than I would. What was she wearing? What were you doing there? Other thing, quickly, she lived nearby. She had children. It was at night, obviously, and she went down, to my understanding of the story, she needed cigarettes, and this is in the days, I remember this, when they'd have vending machines for cigarettes in the bar, and she went down for cigarettes to the bar and left her kids, asked a neighbor, could you just listen for the kids? That came up later, like, what the hell are you doing? You left your kids, you go down, what are you dressed in this? And so obviously you deserve to be raped on a pool table. Obviously this is horrifying, but you can, if you've already done those when you're doing case studies, for instance. Like I usually do Genovese and Big Dan's to introduce case studies and methodology, and you can float all those terms. And then when you do this in social psychology, you can spiral back to all the things you did when you did Big Dan's and the Genovese case. So I gave you all the versions of it. One thing you might want to make yourself a note if you're going to do it, there's 4 versions of the story in there, but I wrote for your benefit version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. Take that off because they all look the same otherwise. I usually just mix them up so that sections of the room will all have one. So, because sometimes kids start to hear things catch on, and then they look at the kid next to them like, what the heck? And they look at me like, no, it's the same story. What are we talking about? So it can delay the drama some. If you kind of go in clusters in the class instead of each person is different. That's just a little thing that I do. You play with it your own way. Okay, thank you.
And while you were talking, which I love all his creative ideas, I'm thinking, you know, that seedy bar example, just change it to a university campus and a fraternity party. Wouldn't that be an interesting scenario to compare how they think about, you know, what's going on upstairs and they're all partying and who cares? Do they do anything about it? And you know the number of rapes on campuses are ridiculous. I don't even want to give you the statistics. So, you know, that's another scenario you could put in there for discussion.
Or a sorority house.
Or a sorority house rather than the fraternity house to, you know, isn't that interesting? So, you know, lots of great ideas for what I believe, and I can definitely see that most of us in this room believe, active learning. We want active learning in our classrooms. Okay? So, for the last 12 minutes, maybe not any active learning. We're all like tired, I'm sure. But I did want to give you a couple suggestions on how you can talk about some new research in your classroom, and also a great area to study at the end of the school year, no matter what class you have, because certainly after AP exams, you want things to do that the kids are going to be interested in. And, you know, they need something for 2-3 weeks, depending on your class schedule, your school year. For your regular psych classes, the same thing. Something that they can relate to, something that's new, something that's personal, And something that also is important is to help them to understand what is the real science behind all this research on happiness, which some people tend to lump into this category of positive psychology, when in fact it's not just positive psychology. It's a lot more than that. And it's been around for a lot longer than just the short time period that we've seen it after Seligman became president of the APA. So I mean, it's been around for a long time in history, all over the world, so this is multicultural. You can use this in your history classes as well as your psychology classes and your sociology classes. So I call it teaching the science of happiness. And please don't think I'm trying to sell you anything, because I'm not, all right? But this is a really great website, which it's funny that you mentioned Bridgeport, because the man who came up with this idea teaches at the University of Bridgeport. And he is a professor of martial arts and Eastern religions, and he's an expert in Asian philosophy, and he's a philosopher. And somehow, I don't even know how I met him, can't remember, somehow I met him, and we started talking about how we could develop ideas for teaching about the science and the history of happiness. He had this original idea, and I said, I'll help you, because I didn't know how to say no. And so this pursuitofhappiness.org is a nonprofit organization, and he came up with this and got help from a psychiatrist from Yale and another woman who's absolutely phenomenal, who knows how to do curriculum development. In fact, she was the one that worked on that website I told you about on race. She worked on that website. And they developed this website, and now on the website are all kind of resources and activities that teachers can use to teach about the history and the science of happiness, going back to the ancient Greeks and really comparing what they knew about it then to what our psychologists are learning about it today. So it's just full of great resources. Health classes can definitely incorporate this curriculum. You know, we study about stress and exercise and a lot of issues. You know, what are the correlates of happiness? Like, if you really break it down, you know, what do we really know about the science of happiness? And what are the correlates that we have found that do relate to happiness all over the world, in cultures all over the world, just like the Blue Zone study? You know, how can you identify these things that are in common? And across time, from like the Greek ancient times to today, the 21st century. So on this website, there's all kinds of information. This is just an example of a couple of the pages that deal with exercise. It's one of the very important correlates to the science of happiness. There's ideas on the website on how you can incorporate this into your curriculum. So for example, I did this part when it talks, where it talks about, like, if you're teaching high school and you have an elective, how can you incorporate this into your high school class if you have 18 weeks, 9 weeks, whatever, 2 weeks? What can you do? Can you use it to study motivation? There's a lot of great resources on here, which I'll really quickly show you, that relate to the studies on motivation and happiness and optimism and all that we teach in our curriculum in both the high school intro and AP classes. So, there's pages on all these famous psychologists. Abraham Maslow, of course, is one of them. There's readings. There's links to other sites that relate to Maslow and his studies on motivation and this whole hierarchy of needs. All right. There is information about, like, here's an activity that you can do in class. So, for example, happiness through purpose, which is a very important concept related to happiness. Do you have purpose in life? Remember, again, the video. Why do you wake up in the morning? Isn't that purpose for the Blue Zones? So students can explore different ways of increasing happiness through having a sense of purpose. And here's an example of a real simple activity that you can do. There's a lot of topics that are listed on the website, and they can look at the related readings, the activities, they can report on it, they can blog on it. If you have a wiki, they can do stuff on your wiki. They can talk in small groups, they can present their findings. A lot of different, very simple activities that you can come up with that actually can be started in class. They can work on them on their own, and then maybe one day in class they can present. So it's not like you have to spend days and weeks on this. You decide how long you want to take to do a single exercise or two, or if you want to spend a week on it. Certainly with humanistic theory and motivation, if you still teach that, there's information on there that you can incorporate into your psych class. This is the page on the history of happiness, and all these pages have been updated, so when you go to the website, it looks really different. It's really cool. I'll show you. But you can see the various pictures of the people there, and if you click on their photos, it brings up their link, and it talks about their studies from their time period and what they learned, and whether they're these are mostly philosophers as well as scientists and psychologists, and you might recognize a few of their faces. I found this video that we have linked, I believe, to the website now, but it's the interview with the expert. That's something that we thought would be a great idea for teachers to use. Instead of just reading about the people, they find the videos where they listen to the expert talk. And I never saw this video that Frankl did, and I love Frankl, and the book that he wrote, Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, was the book that I remember reading and was most significant in my life in college. And I had to do a presentation on logotherapy, but it wasn't the logotherapy part that really impressed me so much. But when I think about how I can use that in my classroom and discuss it with the students in a lot of different areas of my psychology class, I thought that was a great thing to put in there. And of course, it relates to sense of purpose. There are activities and ideas on optimism, and I tried to put on there, things like essential questions, pre-reading assignments, and I already put this on the wiki, so you'll have this whole PowerPoint, okay? Discussion topics that you can use with your students specific to some of these concepts and activities. So there's a number of different things that you can do with your kids, and there's links to, for example, other websites like Authentic Happiness. If you've never been to that website, it's phenomenal. All right, it's from the University of Pennsylvania, and of course it was the website developed by Mr. Seligman. All right, and it's a fantastic website with all these questionnaires that you can upload and have your students look at and become a part of. So it's like awesome for getting all these questionnaires and engagement activities for your kids. So that's something I suggest that you take a look at. And again, other practical assignments that the kids can actually do, like maybe little experiments and activities that they can report on in journals if you don't have time to discuss them in class. So there's a lot of ideas on here that, again, you can look at and you can do whatever you want with. But I do highly suggest that you check out these individual psychologist experts' websites. Diener on happiness talks about subjective well-being, which is a very important correlation to happiness all over the world. There are links to Diener on the website, which is called The Pursuit of Happiness, as you can see. There are other links on here that relate back to happiness. In fact, on the wiki that I've been telling you about, I've had this page on there forever, but on the wiki I have a page that relates to like what I gave my students to do using the websites when we first developed it, and it's just a real simple activity page. So do this, do that, read a couple ideas, go to this center, look at this. This is the unit plan, by the way, that Amy wrote most of for positive psychology for TOPS. The whole unit plan is accessible on the TOPS website, but there's also links to parts of it on the UPenn website. So you can actually see some of the outlines of how to use this in your classroom if you want to teach positive psychology. Amy Feinberg was pretty much the main author of that particular unit plan for TOPS. These are the kind of things that I think our students would benefit from doing in our classroom. We can relate it to them in so many different ways. There's interest, you know how they are. They're egotistic, they want to talk about themselves, they want to learn about themselves, they want to share their ideas. I also believe that understanding more about happiness helps them to understand themselves better. I do think that, if you want to get some ideas on how professors teach about this, we had permission to put Haight's syllabus on here that he teaches, a course called Flourishing. And so you can look at his syllabus. And another syllabus on here from another school, Louisiana, another course that it teaches the correlation between ancient and modern ideas, which I find fascinating. I love philosophy. And I think psychology has so much philosophy in it. Of course, we all know the history of how it really is related. So to bring these two together in your classroom, if it's at all possible, I think is really, really cool. The BBC has websites that you can go to with great resources on the science of happiness. Daniel Gilbert, of course, an expert in the field, was a keynote speaker at APA convention, and his article on The Monitor is here. That's the APA magazine, The Monitor. So you can read what he has to say on happiness. The APA, of course, internet resources, and join TOPS. What can I say? Join TOPS, because you will get all these references if you join TOPS. And again, it will be worth your while and your time to go through these references and spend a week or two just realizing how much is here for you to use in your classroom next year. You know, during the course of this summer, I really think it will be useful to you to do that. There's articles in the Monitor on biopsych that relates to happiness, how they are looking at the fMRI, okay? And how they're learning about what the philosophers talked about and how there is a link to the brain with the way they discussed things that people were thinking and philosophizing, and human morality, like you were just giving a great example of a moral exercise, a moral dilemma exercise. I mean, this all relates to so many different things in psychology. It's amazing. I'm just going to tell you to look at this if you have time. It's on the wiki already, along with the other things. There's lesson plan templates I was going to show you, how it relates to the standards, which I was going to show you. And if you're interested, oh, it's cute little funny. What do you think? Should we get started or not? Are you motivated? Really? Are you motivated to go back and start thinking about your classrooms? Because I am. I learned a lot here myself. I'm motivated. Okay? There's a professional development. You can go free. This is a 2-week course. I didn't want to show you that. I'm sorry. But there's a professional development opportunity for you to participate on the website. You can take 1-hour seminars, and there's one coming up in August, and it's free. And all you have to do is have a phone and a computer in front of you. And there are seminars that are coming up, and we try to do one every couple months. So this is Mark from University of Bridgeport, and this is Paul from Yale, and that's Allison, and that's me. And Mark and Paul do most of the seminar, and I usually chime in on things too, as well as like how you can use this in your classroom. But this is called the Happiness 101 webinar. So if you go to the website and you look up Happiness 101 webinar, you can see how to sign up for it, and it's free, and it's a cool hour of discussion, and you can learn all about those correlates that I was telling you about that are so important to understanding the history and the science of happiness on this website. And that's probably all I have time for, because I know Kurt's going to pull the cane around my neck. But there's the new website right there.